Hello, Carolyn.
Hi, how are you?
Apologies, we're running a little bit late. We
Okay.
went over the last meeting, but so far we're having a great community day.
Sorry?
So far we're having a great community day.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Okay, so I will let people in and let's get started. So welcome everybody to our community day. Today's special guest, we have Carolyn Jung, also known as the Food Gal. And she is a Bay Area food writer who has published 2 books, San Francisco's Chef's Table, and most recently, East Bay Cooks. And Carolyn is a James Beard Award-winning writer. And for those of you who don't know, the James Beard Foundation Award recognizes the top chefs, restaurateurs, authors, and journalists each year. And she's also a recipient of Columbia University Graduate School of Journalism Award of Excellence for Diversity Writing, an award from the American Association of Sunday and Features Editors, and numerous first-place honors from Association of Food Journalists and the Peninsula Press Club. And for 11 years, she was the food writer for the San Jose Mercury News, and her work has appeared in the San Francisco Chronicle, San Francisco Magazine, Silicon Magazines, Napil Gazette, Wine Spectator, Everyday with Rachel Ray, East Bay Express, and many other publications. And you can read Carolyn's blog at her website, www.foodgal.com. And my name is Tina Choi. I'm the CEO of Travonde, and our mission is to build healthier and happier lives in older adults and their family. And our community Zoom Day was created during the pandemic in collaboration with Redwood City and the VMSC to promote this very mission of advocacy for seniors. So thank you so much, Carolyn, for joining us. And
Oh, my pleasure.
And today she'll answer all your questions about food, cooking, and restaurants.
I will definitely try to.
Yeah, so welcome, Carolyn. And I'm a big fan of your blog and an avid reader of your column when you were at the San Jose Mercury News. So let's get going. So
Sure.
you started as a news journalist and then transitioned to the world of food writing. Can you tell us a little bit about your background and how food became your life?
Well, I would say that food has always been my life because I'm Chinese American. And I think Asians in particular just love food. Even when I was in elementary school, my friends and I would save up our allowance money. And, supermarket cookies were just not good enough for us. So we would go to our corner bakery and load up on meringues and French style cookies and all that good stuff. And even when I was in high school and going into college, my very best friend and I, we didn't give each other normal presents. What we did was we took each other out instead to restaurants like Chez Panisse or Massa's. And I think, I've just always enjoyed cooking and reading about food and going to new restaurants. So my first part of my career was actually, in sort of hard news journalism. So I covered everything from weather stories to trials to city council meetings galore. And I was actually at the Mercury News on the race and demographics team, covering minority communities and the issues that face them, when our food editor at the paper decided not to come back after maternity leave. And so the job came open. And even back then, that type of position is really rare. So, there might be one food editor at every newspaper and that's it, or one food writer at every paper and that's it, and even less so now. So I was not one of those people who grew up thinking, oh my God, since I was 5 years old, I want to be a food writer. No, that never crossed my mind. And it was actually my good friends and colleagues at the paper who kind of nudged me into applying. I mean, I saw the posting and I thought, oh, that could be kind of fun, but I never necessarily leaped at it thinking, oh yes, this is what I've been waiting for. So I actually always credit one of my good friends and former colleagues, Kim Boatman. She had been a reporter in many different parts of the paper, from sports to news to she was also doing a freelance gig as a food writer at the paper at the time. And she said to me, you know, this is your dream job. And if you don't know if you really want to do it, what you should do is go home tonight and take a sheet of paper, divide it in half, and give yourself 1 minute to come up with story ideas for your current beat, and then another minute to write down story ideas for the food beat.
Mm.
So I'm always embarrassed to say that my list for the food beat was like this long. And then my list for stories for my own beat was like this. And I think that gave me the nudge and the ammunition I needed to sort of take that leap. And it was the best step ever because I got to do a job that actually had been a passion for and a hobby for much of my life. And I think I'm very lucky and grateful that I get to do something that I love. And I know that's not always the case with people and the jobs that they have.
Yeah, for sure. What is the hardest job of being a food writer? It just seems so fun.
Everyone always says, like, oh, you have such a glamorous job. Oh my God, you're always going out to these places and whatnot. Yes, that is true, but it's not always what you think it is. For instance, when I first started the food writing job at the paper, the restaurant critic at the time, Sheila, she said, oh, let me take you out on a couple of my reviews, and you could just sort of get a feel for what I do, and you know, you could be company for me. So I think the first place she took me to turned out to be like a 1-star place. She decided not even to write about it afterwards. And then the second time she took me out, it was a 2-star place. And I thought, is she playing a trick on me here, or is she trying to get back at me? How come we're not going to any like really wonderful places? So I think that's something people forget about sometimes, that not every place that we go to is necessarily serving the most incredible, upscale, trendy food that there is. Now, that's also the case mostly for a restaurant reviewer. For myself, I do everything but really reviews when I write for publications. So I think I actually have the more fun part, because if I go visit a chef, if I go visit a restaurant, it's because I want to highlight something that they're doing really well. So I would say the other tough part about it is like any other kind of writing job. I mean, I have deadlines that I'm juggling all the time. Unlike news stories, when I was working on that side, a lot of times people would not want to return your calls being a reporter. So, you know, you call lawyers, you call police sergeants that you needed to get a quote from, and they wouldn't return your calls, or they might hang up on you because they don't really want to deal with you. Now with food, most times people love to talk to you because it's a topic that everybody enjoys and everyone partakes of. Now, that being said, chefs and restaurateurs have some of the most crazed schedules that there are. So sometimes getting time with them when you are on a tight deadline can be really difficult. So you are often emailing them constantly, leaving voicemail messages, texting them, and just kind of tearing your hair out. Hopefully that you will get in touch with them in time to turn your story in. So it's like any other kind of writing job.
Right. Well, talking about interviewing chef, can you tell us a little bit about your new book, East Bay Cooks?
Sure, that actually came out in the fall, winter of 2019, and we were doing a lot of events for it until, of course, what happened in March 2020. So that kind of curtailed things a bit, but that was a really fun project to work on. And you can see a copy of the book right here. And
Wow.
it's a gorgeous book, as you can see from the photography. It's a very modern design because the chef portraits are all done in black and white, and then the food is done in color. So it's a very high contrast design. So That book came about just sort of out of the blue. I was checking my email box, inbox one day, and up popped this query from a publisher, which is Figure One Publishing. They're based in Canada. And they said, hey, we do these series of books where they highlight a certain city or geographic area, and we include like 40 something chefs with their stories and recipes. And we've had huge success in this in Canada, and we want to do this in the US. And so East Bay Cooks was actually the second one that came out. The first one was in Portland. And I just loved the idea, and I jumped at it. And it was an incredible experience because they are just so thorough in all that they do. That's not to say it was an easy project. I mean, I probably had probably from January until July to finish the manuscript. And so that includes getting 41 chefs, restaurants on board, getting 2 recipes from each of them, testing those recipes,
oh my goodness,
editing them all, and
oh
writing a like 250 word profile of each restaurant. So it's a lot, and I kind of cajoled all my friends who like to cook into helping me test a lot of the recipes, and I tested about half of them myself. And it was a real undertaking. I mean, I think sometimes I was, my husband will tell you that he would come home sometimes and see me like, oh my God, are you okay? Because it was so stressful at times, just trying to get everything done in a timely manner. But when I saw the book and held it in my hand the very first time, I mean, it just gave me chills because I never imagined it would look so incredible. And it was just such a gratifying experience. And I met so many wonderful chefs who I'm still friends with today. And I feel this kinship with them and following their careers now since the book came out and seeing what they've done. And I think the book also is a nice tribute, especially in this difficult time with the pandemic, and restaurants have gone through so much. It sort of reminds us all of the places in our neighborhoods, in our communities, about the importance that they are in making our lives more delicious, more fun. Yeah. And I think it's sort of a reminder that we shouldn't ever take them for granted. I mean, just sadly enough with this book, I know there are a couple restaurants and bakeries that have since closed during the pandemic that are featured in this book. And it's sad to see that happen.
Right. And with the pandemic, I really just miss the family get together, and just.
Exactly.
Yeah. It really makes you think about restaurants or places.
And the sense of that they give you of being taken care of. You sit down at a table and you can talk to the sommelier and the waiters and get a sense of their backgrounds. Like, where did you work before and how long have you worked here? Or, tell me a little bit about this particular lettuce on the menu. Where does that come from and what's special about it? I mean, it's so different than all of us have been getting so much takeout and cooking in our own kitchens during this time. And it feels like such a treat now to be able to return to restaurants.
So talking about your book, what is your favorite recipe from that book?
Oh my gosh, there's so many, and I hate to sort of just single out one, but I know I talked with you a little bit before this, and I have to say one of my favorites is from Duende Restaurant in Oakland, which is a Spanish style restaurant. They do paellas and incredible tapas and everything that can be made from scratch they do, and they do their own butchering and everything. So there is a salad that has been on the menu since they opened, and it's ensalada del col, and it's a cabbage salad, which on the face of it doesn't sound too exciting, right? I mean, cabbage, right? But I always feel, especially I've learned this during the pandemic when I've tried to keep a lot of things in my produce bin that are hardy and that last for a while, so I don't have to like shop every day necessarily. And cabbage is one of those things. It's sort of this unsung hero, and you realize how incredible tasting it can be in so many different preparations. So this cabbage salad is as easy as it gets. I mean, you can make it in probably less than half an hour. You just shred cabbage and you make this wonderful sort of champagne vinaigrette dressing that has a touch of cream just to give it a little bit of nice body to it. And then there's this Spanish cheese that just grated all over it. And if you have it at the restaurants and you see it in the book, the photo of it, it's sort of just this mountain of snowy cheese on top of the salad. And it has the bite of anchovies and olives and pistachios. And it's just such a bold tasting salad that just fills your palate.
Mhm.
I mean, I think that a lot of times people underestimate this dish. I told you as when we did the photo shoot for this salad, the chef brought it in, and we were lucky enough that once the photographer finished taking the photos, we got to sort of munch on everything. And I remember the photographer and the stylist looking at the salad and they're thinking it's pretty, but they're like, oh, cabbage salad, I'll save myself for something else that
Right.
we can have. And I said, no, you have to try this. And they did. And I mean, they just ate it up. It just is one of those dishes that surprises and is so much more bang for the buck than you would think. And
Right.
I've made this probably half a dozen times, and I've made it a couple times for my in-laws for Christmas and Thanksgiving. And the really great thing about it is because it's cabbage, it's very hearty and it stands up and
Mhm.
its crunchiness lasts. So you can make this, an hour ahead of time, couple hours ahead of time before you serve it and just leave it in the fridge. Or even if you have leftovers the next day, it's still crunchy and bright. So it's definitely one of my favorites.
Wow. And what page is that on? On your
Oh, let
book?
me see.
And we
I
can
will
get that
have
on
to look
Amazon, right?
this
Your book?
up if you give me a second here. Oh, here's the picture. You can see.
Oh, yummy.
And this
Wow.
is Chef Paul Canales, who's super
Wow.
talented. And so this starts on page 82 of the book.
Wow. And we can get your book on Amazon.
Yes, and also at the participating restaurants who are in the book, they also sell the book. I know
Wow.
some of them have since sold out, but quite a few of them still have it. And then a lot of the East Bay bookstores also carry it.
Right.
And I'm also thrilled to say that SF MoMA also carries it.
Oh, that is so awesome. I haven't been there in about 3 years now since the pandemic started.
Oh, I know. Yeah. The last time I was there was actually just right before the pandemic, and I signed a couple copies there for them.
That is so cool. So talk about signing copies. Are you going to have any in-person events? I know you did a big event for May.
Yeah, I don't know if I don't have anything planned right now.
Mhm.
We did do quite a few things when the book came out at the end of 2019, and then again early into 2020 before things kind of shut down in March.
Right.
Um,
Wow. So I'm done with my questions, but I did get 5 questions from the audience
oh,
to the
okay.
email. So can I ask those now?
Sure.
Okay, so one of them says, I am recently retired and what do you call that? I'm recently retired and I love food and rating of food. How do I become a food writer? I guess they want to do
Oh.
it.
Do you mean like a professional food writer, like you're getting paid to write, or do
I
you
don't
mean
know.
just
I'm
kind
not
of
sure.
for fun?
For
Well,
fun,
there's
I would
okay,
say.
so there's 2 ways you can go about this then. So the easier way, if you want to just write about food, you could start your own blog,
Mhm.
which is easy enough to do. There's so many blogging platforms. I use WordPress and it's free, and you just have to register a domain name and have a hosting site. And then it's completely your baby. You decide how often you want to post, what you want
Okay.
to post on, if you want to specialize in something or another, or if you want to just run the gamut of everything that entails food. And the other thing you can do is, of course, with social media, you don't even have to start a blog, just have a really populated Instagram page,
Okay.
and people find you that way, or Facebook too. If you're talking about more professional food writing, I think that's a little bit more difficult and challenging,
Right.
especially if you want to make a living at it, which is
Sure.
difficult in the Bay Area because it costs so much to live here, of course, compared to so many other parts of the country. You know, I was lucky enough that I came up through newspapers, and it gave me a real way to make a living writing and reporting. And that, of course, is a little more difficult nowadays because so many papers have cut back on staffs, cut back on food sections, cut back on how much freelance writing that they pay for.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say, you know, the flip side of that, though, is that there are more sort of online
Right.
options that you can try and seek out. Um, Places like Eater and magazines that operate just online. They often take freelance pitches, and it's a difficult field to sort of just kind of cold call editors and pitch them a story, especially if they don't know you and if you don't necessarily have any published writing that they can look at. But I always feel, whether it's naive or not, that if you just persevere and you try your best and you look for opportunities, you will find your way some
Mm.
way, somehow.
I believe that too.
We're optimists, yeah.
Right, exactly. And then we have this two questions that's kind of related. What is the best meal you've ever had? And maybe what's the best suggestion for a nicely, moderately priced restaurant in the peninsula, but vegetarian? That's actually a good question.
Oh, okay. Well, you know, best meal I ever had is so hard to really choose one, because I might like it for different reasons. And I've had incredible meals that I've been lucky enough to have experienced. Everything from, gosh, um, I was invited a few years ago to the Modernist Cuisine Lab in Washington State. If you know the Modernist books, which are these,
Right.
you know, 6-volume books on a certain topic, like pizza or bread baking or whatnot. And it is essentially a laboratory setup where they have the most gifted chefs cooking with all these avant-garde techniques. And it's not a restaurant per se, it's something that you have to get invited to. And I actually was able to get invited because I did a story years ago for it for Food Arts. But that was a really interesting event. It was salute to sort of women chefs. So there were, gosh, I want to say something like 40 of us, and even the few media that attended, we were all females. And it was a menu of something like 38 courses. And I just remember, I think maybe a third of the way through, one of the women chefs was talking to another and said, "Oh my God, you know, what course are we on? We're getting so full." And then we had learned earlier that a group of male chefs had been invited to do the similar thing. And I remember one of the female chefs said, "You have to suck it up. If the guys did it, we can do it too." So we did, and it was just breathtaking experience. So that too, I mean, simple things, even like I remember going to Hawaii years ago, and I had a chance to go to the Honolulu fish market where all the fishermen sell their fish to restaurants and markets. And so it's kind of like a small version of Tsukiji market in Japan.
Right. Right.
And you have to get up at the crack of dawn and go there. And again, I was invited to witness the proceedings. And you go into this warehouse, and it's freezing. And mind you, this is Hawaii, so you have the contrast of, you know, it being super hot and humid outside, and then you walking into this refrigerator box where there are all these huge tunas and opa and all kinds of fish just laid out, and then this sort of huddle of buyers just kind of moving along the aisles, eyeing every fish and then bidding on the ones they wanted. And I remember afterward, I was with my husband, and we finished maybe around, I don't know, I want to say something like 7 in the morning, and we walked from the pier to this little tiny cafe that a lot of the fishermen ate at, and the cafe would get fresh fish that morning and just cook it up in these very simple ways. So here we are sitting outside on the water. The sun is just starting to rise, and I'm having this ahi omelet with ahi that was just right out of the water. And I just remember thinking, God, you know, it doesn't get much better than this. And again, that was not some fancy multi-course meal. It was as simple as it could be, but just the ambiance and the setting and the freshness of the ingredients, it just always stayed with me as this very special moment.
Wow, those are the best. Those are the best memories.
And as for vegetarian restaurants on the peninsula, I think we're very lucky these days that restaurants are very cognizant of people's dietary restrictions and preferences and allergies. So I think almost any place that you will go to will be able to accommodate you. And, you know, even on the menu itself, you know, they'll list vegetarian, vegan, gluten-free, what have you, vegetarian, etc. And a lot of times too, when you first sit down, especially at restaurants that have been around for a while, they'll ask you, you know, do you have any allergies or things that we need to know about? And so they will tailor the menu to you or suggest things.
That's great.
So, but definitely a lot of the ethnic cuisines have a lot of vegetarian, vegetable-based foods and dishes. And we're trying to think of what else. Yeah, a lot of the ethnic places I think are a wonderful place to start.
Okay, thank you. We have a question from the audience. Linda, do you want to unmute yourself and ask your question? If not, I can ask the question for her.
She's being shy.
Okay, so it says, hi, Carolyn. I love reading your books and your blog. I have 2 questions. What are your 3 favorite dishes and food? And what are your 3 favorite cookies?
Oh my God. My 3 favorite foods.
This is interesting.
Okay.
I love chocolate chip.
Well, as you and I were talking the other day, one of my very favorite things I have, first of all, I should say I have this enormous sweet tooth. I mean, dessert is probably my favorite part of the meal, any meal. And I love baking. And during the pandemic, it became sort of not only something I did for work and for fun, but also my stress relief. And at one point, I think my husband said, "You need to stop. We can't keep eating all this." So, but number one, definitely for me, is a pastry called the Queen Amande, which is a French pastry from Brittany. And it's kind of like a croissant turned into itself into sort of almost a muffin shape. And then sugar is layered in between the layers. So then when the whole thing bakes up, the sugar gets very caramelized and crispy. And then you have all these buttery layers. It's just the best thing. And the one I always head to is Bee Patisserie, which to me is sort of one of the top standards for that pastry. And I love it so much that whenever I am in San Francisco for work or visiting anyone, I always look at my watch and think, can I make it to Bee Patisserie before I have to get onto the freeway and get into commuter traffic? and can I find parking? And so I always try and make the trek there just for that. And they just do an incredible job with it. Gosh, my other favorite food is, well, not only do I have a sweet tooth, I also probably have never met a carb that I didn't like. And I know that is like the wrong thing to say these days, because so many people are like, oh no, I can't eat carbs, I don't eat bread, I don't eat pasta. And I'm just like, I could eat that all the time. And I probably do, but I love pasta, especially handmade pasta with a great sauce, or pizza. I love artisan breads. Whenever the only traveling that we've been doing lately is mostly car driven trips. I haven't been on a
Right.
plane in the past few years. And my husband always jokes that wherever we go, when we are leaving that place to come home, that the back seat of the car is just filled with like loaves of bread and
Yeah.
boxes of pastry, because I'm like, oh, we have to stop here, and oh, we have to get bread here, and oh, we have to go get some cookies there. So those are kind of my favorite foods. As you can tell, not necessarily always the healthiest, but I truly believe in the late great Julia Child's philosophy,
Mhm.
which is everything just in moderation. So
Mm.
I believe that if you don't have necessarily any health issues that you have to be really worried about, just enjoy what you like, but within reason. I mean, I'm not eating a Queen Amman every day or every week or even every month, as much as I would love to. But I know, I can't do that. Um,
Right.
and it's the same thing, enjoy your chocolate, enjoy your pasta or whatnot, but maybe not every week.
Right.
But
Yeah.
but don't banish it from your life just because you think something is not healthy.
Yeah. Even if I want to banish cookies and bread, I don't think I can.
Oh, the other
Yeah.
thing I guess was my favorite cookies. Oh man. I can never resist a really good chocolate chunk cookie, especially when it's still warm and the chocolate is still all gooey and it gets all over your hands. That to me is total comfort food. What else do I like? I love at Bouchon Bakery, they do a version of the Nutter Butter cookie. And
Mm.
so it is these two big peanut butter cookies that are really soft. And inside is this peanut butter buttercream filling. And it's so peanut buttery and just so satisfying that I cannot, when I'm up in wine country, again, I have to always stop at that bakery and get a bunch of stuff, including a Nutter Butter.
Now I want to go.
And then my other favorite one lately that I've been making is how many of you guys have been watching Ted Lasso on TV? So of course the Ted Lasso biscuits, which are British term for what we would call shortbread.
Mhm.
And there's been a bunch of recipes for it all over the internet. And so I made the official one from the Ted Lasso show, and it was good. It was a very classic traditional shortbread. And then I made the version by Christina Tosi of Milk Bar,
Mhm.
and she does hers a little differently because she adds just a touch of brown sugar
Wow.
and a couple of egg yolks. And what that does is gives the shortbread a more caramelized taste, almost
Oh.
a little toffee like. And then the texture is a little, just a tad chewy instead of just totally crumbly. And I think I've made those, gosh, maybe 5 times. And it's so
Goodness.
easy because it's a one pan cookie. And
Right.
then you just cut it up after you bake it. It's so easy. And
Wow. Your
it's
husband is very
so
lucky.
buttery. Yeah.
Yeah, you have a very lucky family.
We like to eat. Yeah.
Oh, we have a couple questions. I'm a fan of your blog. Can you please recommend a cookbook for beginners listing like best cooking equipments, photos, step-by-step instructions? Do you have any good cookbook for beginners
Oh,
that
for
you recommend?
beginners, let me see. Well, I would say that there are a couple that I always reached for, one is Mark Bittman's How to Cook, which is this huge volume, and it has recipes, very basic and a little bit more challenging, but recipes for almost anything you would ever want to cook. So anything from like pancakes to how to roast a chicken to how to make an omelet. I mean, just things that are techniques that are good for your repertoire when you want to learn and improve your techniques. The other cookbooks that I really love, which people always find surprising unless they have looked through these books themselves, are the ones by the Michelin star chef Jean-Georges Vongerichten. And normally most cookbooks by chefs like that are more coffee table books. I mean, it's kind of like pretty pictures and really complicated, complex, long recipes that really none of us are ever going to make. But there are a couple of his books where they are actually quite doable by just your average home cook. And just to let you know, sort of like the type of chef he is, he's actually the one who's credited with making or with originating the molten chocolate lava cake. And that recipe is also in his book. And what happened was he was making chocolate cakes one day, little individual ones, and he took them out too early. And the center was still kind of gooey and a little bit underdone as a result. So it was so delicious that he kept it on his menu. And it's something that is super easy to make. I've made it for dinner parties in the past. And it's once you sort of learn the technique of judging when it is done or not, you can just make it so easily.
Wow, very interesting. I like this accidental menu.
Yeah, I mean,
Menu.
that's what I always tell people about cooking. A lot of people get so intimidated by it and they think, oh, I can't do that. Or I have so many friends who say to me, oh, I can't cook, I'm not very good. And I say, look, you're probably much better than you think you are, that you give yourself credit for. And really, what's the worst that can happen? I think any of us who have cooked have made mistakes or done something that just didn't turn out quite exactly what we had hoped for. But most times it's still edible. You can kind of tweak things, maybe add a little this, a little that, and then you always have a funny story to talk about later on, right?
Right, exactly.
And then if you don't experiment, you never know. You never learn, right?
Right. Yep. So a couple questions from the audience. What country would you love to visit and write about their food?
Oh,
And then another audience asks, what is your dream
before the
destination?
pandemic, I was hoping in 2020 that I would go to Portugal.
Oh,
Spain. I've been to Spain, but it was many, many years ago. And Portugal, I've never been to, but I've had friends who have gone probably pre-pandemic, probably a couple years before the pandemic, and just loved it because the food is so great and they have wonderful seafood. It's a little bit, relatively speaking, more affordable than some other parts of Western Europe. And the people are super friendly and a lot of them are English speaking, so it's not that hard to get around. And of course, they also are famous for their Portuguese custard tarts. So I would go for that. And then the port region where you can go to these wineries and taste port. I would love to do that as well. And then Spain. It's just been way too many years since I've been to Spain. I have always loved that country and the food has just gotten so amazing and so far-reaching in its impact around the world.
right.
So I'd love to go back and check that out and to see the architecture that I love there.
Yes, I would also love to go with you.
Okay.
We should do a community
trip,
day
yeah.
in Portugal. So cooking is often a more family activity. What can you say to the audience about what we can learn from our own family's histories?
Well, I think one of the most wonderful lessons and bonding experiences anyone can have is to cook with their parents or their kids or their husbands, just because it's, life these days is so busy
Right.
and we have so many distractions. We're all looking at our phones too much, we're on the computer too much. When you cook, though, it's as if all of that is wiped away and you're just concentrating on the task at hand, and you can talk to each other and you can learn something together. And at the end of it, there's this shared sense of satisfaction and appreciation for what you just spent time making and enjoying. I always kick myself because I did not have my parents write down as many recipes as I wish I had nudged them to do when they were still around. I have maybe, a handful of recipes of theirs, but I think of so many dishes from my childhood that I look back on fondly and wish I could taste just one more time. And,
Mhm.
I can try and recreate it, but there's just something not quite the same because, maybe there's an ingredient that my mom thought of that she just put a pinch of that I never knew, she used or something. So if there's one thing I could tell all of you right here, it's write down some recipes and give it to your kids, your grandkids, because they will, they might not appreciate it right in the moment, but there's a day when they're going to cherish those so much, and you will be so glad that you did it to pass on this part of yourself that is so meaningful and so personal, and that will live on even after you're not there by their side anymore. It really is a gift that keeps on giving. And it doesn't cost anything, it's just time. And I'll tell you from my personal experience, when I asked my mom to write down certain recipes, she's like, oh, I don't measure,
Mhm.
it's just like a bunch of this and a little bit of that. And I'm like, no, no, no. So when I actually did a story for the Mercury News on some of her recipes, I stood by her side and we measured everything out. And, she kind of frowned like, oh, this is taking too long. And I can't believe, you're doing this. But at the end, I think we're all very happy that we could have this sort of as a record to look back on, and just for her to sort of see it laid out in text like that
Right.
was very, it was very touching for her.
Yeah, that's such a great suggestion.
Yeah, so
Thank you
it
so
make,
much.
do it at Christmas time. It's
Sorry.
like the
Right.
perfect Christmas present to give.
Can
Right.
I call you back?
Um, hold on, let me apologies. um, so we're almost running out of time, but one last question is, can you tell us a little bit about your blog?
Okay. Well, I started it in 2008. So I was at the Mercury News for many, many years as a staff writer, news reporter, and then my last job, of course, as a free writer there. And like many, many people, I got laid off during that time. Was the paper was contracting its staff and its resources. So I wasn't quite sure what I was going to do. I didn't have a plan B necessarily. So I thought, well, let me try my hand at freelancing. And at the very least, I can start my own blog because I had been doing the food blog at the paper at the time. And so
Mhm.
I knew sort of how to set it up and how to work with it. And so that was how it came about. And if people ask sometimes, well, why is it called Food Gal? There's actually a funny story behind that. So when I was at the paper, I would field a lot of phone calls from people. Sometimes they wanted to know about where to get an ingredient or how to interpret a recipe. And I just remember picking up my phone one day, and this woman, this elderly woman with this kind of creaky voice, the first thing she said to me was, is this the Food Gal? And I was like, oh, yeah, I guess it is. And I just thought, oh my God, that is like the cutest thing I've ever heard. So I thought, if ever I do my own blog, that's what I'm going to call it. So there you go.
Great.
It's kind of a little bit about everything, depending on how much time I have, because most of my time it goes to my freelance writing for magazines and newspapers. But in my so-called spare time, I do the blog, and so it's recipes that I test out of cookbooks that publishers have sent me to kind of review and try out. It's also photos and write-ups of restaurants that I've gone to. And I don't necessarily consider these reviews in the true sense, because a lot of times I will get invited to restaurants as a guest of the restaurant. They're just opening, or they know me already from another restaurant that they already have, and they want me to come in and try the food. So I'll come, I'll take pictures and just sort of write up my impressions with my photos on the blog. And other times it's, sometimes it's products that I come across, or people who are local gourmet food producers who say, oh, I just started this pickle company, or I just started baking these nut-free cookies, and I'd love for you to try them. Can I send you a sample? Just, try them and let me know what you think. And so then I'll write about that as well. So it's a little bit about everything.
Wow. Wow. We'll all have to check it out, foodgal.com. Well, we're out of time. Thank you so much, Caroline. I can talk all day with you about food and restaurants.
That's the beauty of food. Yeah.
Exactly.
It touches so many areas of our lives. And
Right. And it
something
really
we
brings
all
community
love
together.
and
Yep.
participate and partake of.
And thank you so much for participating in our community and enriching our community.
You're
Thank you.
welcome. Thanks for having me.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.